The sheriff dragged her sons off in front of the whole town. No charges, no warning, no one dared speak. But when a stranger with no star pinned to his chest walked into town, justice finally got a voice, and it had nothing left to lose. It wasn't the sound of hooves or boots that woke Eliza, just the faint whimper of her youngest, trying not to cry. That sound, barely a thread in the night air, pulled her from the floorboards she slept on and sent her crawling across the cabin, in the dark. By the time she opened the front door, barefoot and shivering, the boy was already in the sheriff's arms, and behind him, 2 deputies had her eldest pinned to the porch rail like a criminal. "Ma!" little Josiah gasped, flailing in the sheriff's grasp. "Don't you touch my sons!" Eliza's voice cracked mid-yell, the cold hitting her bare throat like ice water, but she stumbled forward anyway, grabbing at the sheriff's coat. He struck her so fast she didn't see it coming. Just a flash of his arm, the sound of skin on skin, and then she was on the ground, teeth biting into her own tongue. Her vision swam. The stars above seemed to shimmer like they were mocking her. "You're unfit," Sheriff Maddox said, voice steady, like he was announcing the time of day. "This one was caught stealing from the market. The other can't read his own name. They're wards of the county now." Eliza tried to rise, spitting blood from her mouth. "They're mine." "No," Maddox said. "Not anymore." And then they were gone. She ran barefoot after the wagon as far as her legs would take her, but even as her feet sliced open on ice and gravel, the lantern light of the sheriff's cart disappeared over the ridge. She collapsed by the roadside, sobbing without sound, lungs raw with the burn of failure and frost. No one helped her. No one had stepped out. And by dawn, all that remained was a trail of blood in the snow and a woman too hollow to feel the cold. The sheriff didn't come back that morning. He didn't have to. He'd done what he came to do. And Eliza Wren, who once had 3 sons and no husband, who once refused the hand of a merchant just to keep her boys under her roof, was now a mother with nothing but a memory of their laughter. In Sioux town, folks talked. They always did. Said she'd brought it on herself. Said Maddox must have had reason, and that her boys would be better off in decent hands. No one mentioned the bruises Maddox left behind when he corrected folks. No one asked how many others had lost children to the law for reasons that only made sense in his twisted little book. But someone else was listening. 2 weeks later, a man arrived at the general store with a broken boot and half a coat. He had no badge, no horse, just a scar that cut from his temple to his jaw like he'd been marked by something feral. He didn't speak when Mr. Horn tried to ask his name, didn't give more than a glance when offered a drink. But when the man finally did speak, it was 3 words, and he said them with a voice so dry and deliberate it silenced the room. "Where's the sheriff?" Nobody answered. They didn't have to. The man turned and walked out like he'd only come to get his bearings, and perhaps he had. It was Eliza who found him again. She didn't know why she'd gone to the church. There hadn't been a service since Maddox shot the preacher for refusing to bless a hanging, but that was where the man was, sitting in the pew like he belonged to another century, the light from the broken window throwing shadows across his face. "You looking for him?" she asked from the doorway, not daring to come closer. He looked at her, really looked, not the way men in town did, like she was something unfortunate stuck to their conscience, but like he already knew who she was, like he was trying to remember why. "I saw your boys," he said. Her breath hitched. "They're alive," he added. "But not for long." The words landed like a blow. She staggered forward, fists clenched at her sides. "Where?" "Camp, outside the territory line. Halfway house, they call it. More like a stockyard." Eliza pressed a hand to her mouth. "Who are you?" He hesitated. And then, "Call me Ezra." The name meant nothing to her, but something in it made her knees weaken. Ezra stood slowly and walked toward her, every movement quiet, deliberate. "You said they're not safe?" He nodded. "The sheriff has a buyer. 2 weeks, maybe less." "A buyer?" He didn't answer, didn't need to. Eliza felt the floor tilt beneath her. I have no money, no horse, no one will help me. I went to Judge Walker. He told me Maddox was the law. He's not, Ezra said simply. She looked up at him. Then what are you? His eyes burned like coal beneath ash. The reason he won't sleep, sound again. The room held that stillness, the kind that comes before a storm you know you won't survive, but walk into anyway. Ezra gave her a folded scrap of paper, a hand-drawn map scrawled and stained. You'll need this, but you won't go with me. I have to. No, he said. He'll use you. He knows how. But me? He doesn't know I'm still breathing. She didn't ask what he meant, didn't ask what Maddox had taken from him, but she knew the look in his eyes, because it was the same one she saw in her reflection now, what little of it was left. Ezra turned to go, but before he vanished back into the blizzard-blown night, he stopped in the doorway and said, "Keep your fire lit. I'll send word. When the smoke rises, it means I've found them." Eliza stood there long after he'd gone, long enough to feel the chill seep back into her skin, long enough to wonder if she'd ever see her sons again, and long enough to know if Ezra failed, she would not be far behind him. It snowed the night the smoke rose. Not a soft dusting, but a thick, wind-lashed storm that swallowed the plains in silence. Eliza stared out from the broken window, her fingers raw from feeding the fire. And then, just past dawn, a dark line of smoke cut the sky west of the ridge, straight, deliberate, not from any hearth or accidental blaze. She dropped the kettle, bolted out the door without a shawl. Her lungs seized on the cold, but she kept running, knees buckling with every step, through the drifts. That signal was for her. Ezra had found them. He'd made it through whatever hell waited past the edge of the map. And now it was her turn to do the same. She barely made it to the old mine trail before her legs gave out. But she didn't stop. She crawled, half froze, spat blood when her lips cracked too deep. Still, she didn't stop. When Ezra found her at the tree line, she'd passed out from the cold, face pressed into the snow like she'd been praying to it. He carried her the rest of the way. She woke to a fire. The good kind. Dry heat. Steady. Light. And Ezra watching her with that same coal-eyed stare, like every part of him had once been burned and never fully healed. They moved the boys, he said quietly, before she could ask. Her breath caught. Josiah and Eli. They're not at the camp anymore, but they're close. He's keeping them on a railcar set to leave by a week's end. Destination unknown. She sat up too fast. The dizziness nearly knocked her down again. We have to go now. Tonight. No, Ezra said. You die before we cross the river. I don't care. I do. The words sat heavy in the air. Ezra reached behind him and pulled out a bundle. Her coat, patched and sewn. Her boots, stitched together with rawhide. Her hands trembled as she took them. How long had he spent finding her things, sewing them while she slept? Eliza, he said, I've seen what happens on those cars. They don't come back. You understand? She nodded, slowly. But there was a fire in her now that no storm could kill. Ezra stood. We leave at first light. We'll take the trail, down to Red Hollow, then cut across Widow's Pass. From there, it's 2 hours to the tracks. They'll have guards. He nodded. 4 that I know of, but that's not the worst of it. She waited. The buyer arrives in 3 days. Once the contract's signed, it's over. Eliza's mouth went dry. What kind of man buys children? Ezra looked away. Not a man. And she knew then. He'd seen it. He'd watched it happen before. Maybe not to her boys, but to others. Maybe to his own. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the boys, cold and alone, stuffed between crates, their small voices asking for her in the dark. She swore quietly, that if she didn't reach them in time, she'd spend the rest of her life making Maddox pay, even if it meant dragging herself through hell to do it. At dawn, they moved. Eliza rode behind Ezra on a borrowed mule that seemed to hate them both equally. The wind bit through every layer, and the path was more rock than trail. Once, they had to hide as a patrol passed, Maddox's men, riding in a slow circle like wolves around the camp. Ezra watched them go, every muscle coiled but said nothing. Eliza kept her breath low, praying her heart didn't give them away. By the time they reached Widow's Pass, night had fallen again. That's when the first real test came. A man stood at the narrow bridge crossing, a rifle slung over his back, a toothpick dangling from his lips. He didn't wear a badge, didn't need one. His eyes did all the speaking. Ezra stopped the mule. "State your reason," the man said. Ezra dismounted. "No trouble," he said evenly. "Just passing through." The man looked past him to Eliza. "She don't look like she's out for a joyride." Ezra stepped forward. "We're meeting someone." "Who?" "You don't need that answer." The man laughed once. "You think you're just gonna—" Ezra hit him hard. One strike to the throat, another to the gut. The man went down, gasping. Ezra dragged him by the collar, tied his hands with a leather strap, and rolled him behind the rocks. Eliza stared, stunned. "You didn't—" "He's alive," Ezra said. "But he won't remember us." She followed him across the bridge, heart thudding. For the first time, she realized Ezra hadn't once drawn a gun. Just before dawn, they reached the hill above the tracks. Ezra crouched and pointed. Below them, the rail car. It looked like a cattle box. No windows, just slats. A fire burned beside it. 4 guards, one smoking, one pacing, one asleep, and one writing in a ledger. Ezra passed her a spyglass. She raised it, and her heart stopped. Inside the slats, barely visible, were 2 faces, Josiah, Eli, both huddled beneath a ratty blanket, both awake, staring at nothing. Her hand shook so hard she dropped the glass. "We need a distraction," she whispered. "I'll give you one," Ezra said. "You'll get them out." You can do this, Eliza." She swallowed the panic, the hundreds, voices in her head telling her she couldn't. "Once I light the flare, wait 10 seconds, then run. I'll draw them off the south ridge." She nodded, barely. Ezra reached into his coat and handed her a key. "It fits the boxcar." Her eyes widened. "How?" He didn't answer, because he was already gone. She crawled down the hill, heart pounding, body shaking. The wind cut across the field, stinging her eyes, and then, light, a bright red flare streaked into the sky from the south ridge. The guards looked up. Another boom, a blast from the ridge, rocks tumbling, fire spreading. 2 guards ran toward the sound. The third cursed and went to rouse the fourth. Eliza sprinted, boots slipping, heart hammering. She reached the car, fumbled with the key. The lock stuck. Her fingers bled trying to twist it. Click. It opened. The boys looked up. "Mama?" Josiah whispered. She grabbed them both, pulled them out, ran like hell back up the hill. One guard spotted her. "Hey!" Gunfire cracked behind them. A bullet sliced past her ear. "Don't stop!" she screamed. But Josiah fell. Eliza turned, only to see Ezra come flying out of the smoke, tackling the guard mid-stride. They hit the ground hard. Ezra didn't rise right away. Eliza pulled Josiah. "Up! Go!" Ezra shouted, blood on his cheek. "Go!" She ran, didn't look back. Only when she reached the trees did she hear it. A second shot. Then silence. She clutched both boys tight, but her eyes stayed on the smoke, waiting to see if he'd follow. The woods swallowed the wind and choked the dawn light to ash. Eliza crouched low beneath the fir branches, holding Josiah and Eli close, straining every nerve to hear footsteps, breath, anything that might mean Ezra had made it. Nothing came. Only the crackle of a fire far off behind them, and the distant voices of Maddox's men, growing louder, more frantic, echoing Ezra's name like a curse. Josiah whimpered once, then bit it back, burying his face against her shoulder. "Stay down," Eliza whispered. "No matter what." But inside, she was spiraling. Ezra might have bought them seconds, maybe minutes. But men like Maddox didn't let go. He'd come with more riders. He'd sweep the woods and hang Ezra if he was still breathing, or bury him quick if he wasn't. She counted backward. 10, 9, 8. A branch cracked behind them. She flung herself in front of the boys, then a hand touched her shoulder. Ezra, barely standing. One arm limp, jaw split open, blood trailing down one side of his face like a red tear. But his eyes were sharp. "Alive!" "I said run," he rasped, voice half gone. "We did," Eliza whispered. "You just run harder." He gave a broken smile, then dropped to one knee. "We gotta keep moving." "No." She pulled the boys close. "You're hurt. You can't." "I'm fine." He wasn't. His legs shook. He couldn't even hold his weight. But he looked to the boys, and something steadied in him. "There's a ridge path west of here. If we follow it, there's an old ranger station. Should be empty. From there, I know a route through the riverbed. No patrols." Eliza hesitated. "We'll never make it with you like this." "You don't get it." His voice dropped. "They won't chase just to catch you. Maddox has got something to prove. You humiliated him, and I stole from him." "What did you steal?" Ezra looked away. "A name. That's all." She didn't ask again. They moved in silence. The boys huddled close. Ezra limped behind them, jaw clenched so tight she swore it might crack. His coat had a new hole, fresh blood blooming down his side. But he didn't stop. Not once. Eliza knew better than to offer help. Whatever pride he had left was holding his ribs in place. Just after midday, the clouds shifted, and in that brief wash of light, Josiah turned to her and whispered, "Mama, where's Papa?" Eliza's legs nearly gave out. She'd rehearsed the answer for over a year, told herself she'd be ready when it came. But here, with Eli sniffling beside her and Josiah looking up with those hopeful eyes, she crouched and held them both. "Your Papa loved you. But sometimes, love isn't enough to keep someone from getting lost." Josiah stared at her, then nodded like he understood. Eli just pressed closer. Ezra watched it all and said nothing. By dusk, they reached the ranger station. It was little more than a shack, half rotted but dry inside. Ezra collapsed against the far wall, breath ragged. Eliza built a fire, ignoring how the match shook in her fingers. The boys huddled in a corner, exhausted. Eliza sat across from Ezra. He didn't meet her eyes. "They'll come at night. Maddox won't wait. You need to rest. I won't get the chance." She looked at his wound. The bleeding had slowed, but the color in his face told her more. "You saved us." "I didn't do it for thanks. I didn't say thank you." He smiled faintly. "Good." She hesitated. "What did you mean, a name?" Ezra stared at the ceiling. Before Maddox was sheriff, before he put on that silver badge, he was just another outlaw in a town full of ghosts. He ran freight for men who didn't show their faces, traded people like they were cattle, said they were all criminals, all trash. "You were one of them?" He shook his head. "No, but someone I loved was." Eliza waited. She had fire in her, wouldn't be sold, bit one of the guards. They hung her for it, never even let her bury her real name. Maddox gave her a new one, just a number. He swallowed hard. "I took it back." Eliza's breath caught. Her name, Delilah. Silence fell between them, not empty, but weighted, heavy with what they'd both lost, what neither could say. An hour later, the boys were asleep. That's when they heard the hooves. Ezra stood fast, swaying. Eliza grabbed the rifle. There was no time to run. No back, door, no tunnel. Just one way in. The first rider crested the ridge, torch in hand. Ezra pulled Eliza close. "Get them under the floorboards." She blinked. "What?" he pointed. "Now, loose boards behind the stove." She hesitated, then moved. She roused the boys gently, slid them into the narrow crawl space, pressed a kiss to each forehead. "Don't make a sound," she whispered. "No matter what." The last board slid back into place just as the door cracked open. 3 men stepped in. The first wore Maddox's badge. Eliza raised the rifle. Maddox laughed. "You really think you're getting out of this?" Ezra stepped forward, hand half raised. "It's me you want." Maddox's eyes flicked to Eliza. "She's got the kids. That makes it her I want. They're not your property. They're runaways." Eliza tightened her grip. "You sold them." Maddox stepped closer. "I rescued them. From you. From that farm with no roof and no food and a mother who couldn't keep her own damn husband." Ezra lunged. The rifle cracked before he reached Maddox. One of the deputies fell, shot in the throat. Eliza didn't wait. She fired again. Missed. Maddox knocked the rifle from her hands. Ezra tackled him. They crashed into the wall, fists flying, blood spraying. The last deputy lunged at Eliza, only to trip over the stovepipe. She grabbed the broken rifle stock and brought it down on his head. Hard. He went limp. Ezra and Maddox rolled, struggling. Then Maddox pulled a knife. Ezra shouted, "Get them out!" Eliza moved fast, yanked the floorboards back, pulled both boys up. "Go!" she screamed. "Through the trees!" The boys ran, Eliza behind them, but she looked back once, just in time to see Ezra stab Maddox through the chest with the man's own knife. Then Maddox fired his revolver, point blank. Ezra staggered, fell. Eliza didn't scream. She couldn't. She just ran. The boys didn't ask what happened. They didn't need to. Ezra didn't follow. By morning, they reached the river. Eliza collapsed beside it, holding both boys tight, heart broken open, lungs shaking with every breath. She stared across the water. There was a man waiting, not a lawman, not a preacher. Just a man in a long coat, standing still. He stepped forward, slowly, as if unsure if he should. Then the sun caught his face. And Eliza gasped, because she knew that face. Not from yesterday, but from years ago, from the day she left home, from the day she married the wrong man. "Papa," Josiah whispered, staring past her. Eliza turned. Her past had caught up, and it wasn't done speaking. The man standing at the edge of the river didn't move when Josiah called him Papa. Didn't blink, didn't speak. Just stood there like the whole world had turned to stone except for him, and even he didn't know if he'd survived the turning. Eliza didn't rise. She couldn't. Her legs wouldn't hold. She clutched her boys tighter, felt their hearts hammering against her arms, and stared across the narrow river as if staring might unravel time itself. The man had more grey in his beard than she remembered. His shoulders were wider too, heavier, like he'd spent the years carrying more than just tools and sorrow. But his eyes were the same. Not kind, not cruel, just tired. The man stepped forward, once, then stopped, boots sinking slightly into the mud at the water's edge. The river ran shallow between them, 30 feet, maybe less. He could cross. She knew it. He knew it. And yet he didn't. "Eliza," he said finally. His voice was quieter than it should have been for the distance, more memory than sound. "I heard what happened." She rose slowly, brushing dirt from her skirt, steadying her breath. "How long you been following us? Since the cabin? Then you saw Ezra." He looked down. She didn't ask what he'd seen. She already knew the answer, by what he wouldn't say. "Why now?" she asked. "Why come back now?" "I never left." That made her laugh, a raw, bitter sound that barely escaped her throat. "You left the day you sold our names for grain, and kept your boots dry while I gave birth alone." He didn't flinch. He didn't apologize either, just looked at the boys like he was trying to add up years in their faces. "I didn't think I was a man fit to raise anyone. And now, You are? I don't know. He looked up. But I know you're not safe on that side of the river. Maddox has 10 more men out by dawn, and your friend bought you maybe one night's head start. You need help. She nodded once. That's true. Then let me help. You've helped enough. Eli tugged her sleeve. Mama, who is that? She crouched, kissed his head. That's someone who lost the right to be in our story a long time ago. But even as she said it, her eyes flicked back across the water. He hadn't moved, hadn't pleaded, hadn't defended himself. That scared her more than if he'd shouted, because a man who's desperate is predictable. But a man who's already lost everything, he's something else. He's free and dangerous. They walked upstream. The river curved away from the ridge, cutting through thicker forest. Her feet ached with every step, and she'd lost count of how many miles since Ezra fell. The boys were quiet now, like they'd aged years in days. She hated that most of all. By dusk, they found an abandoned cart half buried in brush. Someone had used it for shelter before. There were bones in the corner. Animal, she hoped. Eliza cleared space, wrapped the boys in the remains of a canvas tarp, then sat outside alone, watching the woods. A twig snapped. She raised the rifle, but it wasn't Maddox's men. It was him, again, her husband, Jacob. He stepped into the clearing, slow, hands out, empty. I brought food. I don't want anything from you. You don't have to. But they're hungry. He dropped the bundle gently, bread, jerky, and a canteen, and backed away. She didn't touch it until he was gone, didn't sleep either. But when morning came, the boys looked stronger, and that mattered more than pride. 3 days passed like that. Each night he appeared. Each night she refused him. Each day he followed from a distance, never close enough to speak, always far enough to be mistaken for a shadow. She hated how comforted that shadow made her feel. On the 4th night, Josiah crawled into her lap and whispered, "Why does Papa stay away?" Eliza swallowed hard. "Because he doesn't know how to come close." "Did he stop loving us?" "No," she said, brushing his hair back. "He just forgot how to show it." Josiah frowned. "But if we're lost, shouldn't he find us?" She looked out into the dark. "He's trying." Just after dawn, a rider approached fast. Not Maddox's man. This one was alone, coat torn, one arm limp. He pulled up near the cart, spotted her, and called out. "You're Eliza?" She nodded. He dismounted. "Name's Ferris. I used to ride with Maddox, before he turned badge, and forgot what truth was. Your man, Ezra. He gave me a message. Said if I ever saw you, I should tell you where he meant to go. Said it was a promise." She rose fast. "Where?" "There's a place south of Perdition's Hollow. Old boarding. House called Milner's Crossing. Nobody checks it no more. Said if you made it there, you'd be safe." She stared. "Ezra's alive?" Ferris looked away. "Barely, but he's breathing." She turned to pack. Ferris stepped forward. "Wait, there's more. Maddox. He's not just chasing you. He's building something out of this. Told the governor you were part of a gang. Said Ezra was your ringleader. That you both kidnapped the boys from a foster home." Eliza's blood ran cold. He lied. He always lies. But the papers don't care. And the governor's sending marshals. You got maybe 2 days before they close the whole region. She looked at the boys. Then at Jacob, who'd stepped from the trees again, listening. Ferris followed her gaze. "He a threat?" "Once. Not anymore." Jacob stepped forward. "Let me help." "No." "Then let me carry them." She hesitated. Eli was limping. Josiah's cough had returned, and she was so tired. She nodded once. He picked Eli up like he weighed nothing and followed without a word. They made it 10 miles before sundown, crossed into the edge of the Red Hills. Perdition's Hollow was less than a day away. That night, Eliza sat by the fire. Jacob handed her the last of the jerky. "Why now?" she asked. He stirred the coals. "Because I found a letter. One I never meant to read. One you left behind." Her breath caught. He looked up. It was full of hate and hurt, and I deserved every word. But there was one line I can't stop thinking about. You wrote, "You only ever saw the worst in yourself, so that's what you gave us." She turned away. "I'm trying to see better," he said. She didn't answer, but when she lay down beside the boys, she didn't move away when he sat nearby. The morning came loud. Hooves, gunshots in the trees. Ferris burst into the clearing. "They found us! 2 riders!" Jacob grabbed Eli. Eliza took Josiah. They ran downhill into the ravine, ducking branches, the river thundering below. One rider got close, closer than any had before. Jacob spun, yanked the revolver from his belt, and shot once. The rider fell, but Jacob didn't stop. He kept moving, kept running. Eliza saw it in his eyes, that same desperation Ezra had, that same fire. They didn't stop until night. By then, they were 2 ridges from Milner's Crossing, and down one man, Ferris. Gone. They waited in the dark, unsure who else had survived. That's when the stranger emerged. Not Jacob, not Ferris, not Maddox. Someone new. He stepped into the firelight slow, face rough, coat stitched with badge imprints he'd torn off. He looked at Eliza, then at Jacob, then down at the boys. "You're the ones who took back what wasn't meant to be taken," he said. Jacob stood fast. "You with Maddox?" The man shook his head. "I'm with the truth." Then he reached into his coat, and what he pulled out made Eliza go cold. It wasn't a gun, it was a stack of papers, and at the top, "Wanted, Eli and Josiah Holland, kidnapped by mother, assisted by known fugitive." Her name was printed in bold, and Ezra's below it. The man folded it. "I don't believe it," he said, "but the rest of them will." Then he looked up. "You've got 12 hours before Perdition's Hollow becomes your grave." The wanted posters burned slowly in the fire. Eliza watched the flames curl around her own name, charring the letters into black flakes that drifted upward like dying memories. Josiah was asleep with his head on her lap, and Eli was wrapped in Jacob's coat, silent but still awake, his eyes flickering toward the firelight with the sort of quiet that only came when a child learned too young that silence could mean safety. The stranger sat across from them, back straight, revolver on, his thigh eyes trained not on them, but on the woods beyond. He hadn't given his name, and she hadn't asked. She didn't trust him, not yet, but he hadn't killed them either. And in these lands, that meant something. "Why'd you tear those up?" she asked finally. He shrugged. "Because they were lies. That never stopped Maddox." "Yeah, but it stops me." She studied him more closely. He didn't move like a bounty hunter. He didn't move like law. He moved like someone who'd learned long ago how to watch, how to disappear into the edges of a thing until people forgot he was even part of it. Jacob leaned forward, voice low. "You ride with Maddox once?" "No." "Then how you know about the crossing?" The man gave a faint smile. "Because I helped build it, long time ago. Before Maddox turned sheriff, before Ezra ever picked up a gun. That stilled the air." "You knew Ezra?" Eliza asked, heart jumping. The man nodded. "He and I were on the same side once. Until the side stopped making sense." She stared at him. "He alive?" The man hesitated, looked toward the trees. "Yes, but not for long, if Maddox gets to him first." Jacob's jaw tightened. "He's trying to make her look like she kidnapped her own sons. Said I was dead. Said she was insane. Why?" "Because people don't argue with wanted posters," the man said flatly. They don't ask why, only, what? And once the story's set, you can kill a woman in the dirt and say it was justice. He reached into his coat again and pulled something small from the inner lining. A silver badge, scorched and scratched, no longer polished. He held it out in his palm. I wore this once, thought it meant I could protect folks. Then I saw what it really meant, that it could be used against the ones who needed protection most. Eliza stared. You quit? I burned it off my chest the night Maddox hanged a boy I swore to protect. No one spoke. He dropped the badge into the fire. It hissed once, then was gone. I can take you the rest of the way, he said quietly. But once we hit the crossing, there's no going back. Maddox will come, so will others. And if that marshal out of El Paso reads the wrong story first, you won't get a chance to tell the truth. Jacob stood. We'll take that chance. Eliza didn't speak yet, because something deep in her chest told her the truth might not save them, but the lie would kill them slow. They broke camp before dawn, traveling light. Josiah clung to her back. Eli held Jacob's hand. The stranger, still unnamed, led the way, weaving through paths no one but ghosts would remember. By midday, they hit the ridge, and beyond it, through the thinning trees, Eliza saw it. Milner's crossing, or what was left of it. The roof sagged inward, walls blackened from fire, fences long gone. Only the main house stood tall, like it refused to die properly. Jacob stopped beside her. This place was sanctuary once. It still is, the stranger said, if we make it one. Inside, the air was thick with old smoke. A stove leaned, half collapsed against a back wall, and a few shattered dishes remained on rusted shelves. But there was a cellar, hidden under a trapdoor behind the hearth. Ezra's down there? Eliza asked. The stranger nodded. He made it here a day. Before you, barely. He opened the trapdoor. The scent of sweat, blood, and gun oil rose up. Jacob descended first. Eliza followed. And there he was, Ezra. Face pale, ribs bandaged tight, beard thick with weeks of pain. But his eyes opened when he heard her voice. And, when the boys called his name, he smiled, small, weak, but real. I told you I'd find you, he whispered. She knelt and touched his face. You didn't. We found you. He laughed, then winced. They brought him water, fed him. And Eliza finally allowed herself to believe something she hadn't since the night they took her children. They might survive this. But survival wasn't safety, and it sure as hell wasn't freedom. Not yet. The stranger pulled Jacob aside while Eliza tended Ezra. Their voices were low, but not low enough to keep from her ears entirely. Maddox is closing in, he said. There's at least 10 men with him, maybe more. He's planning to burn this place down again, this time with them inside. Jacob's voice was iron. Then we make sure that doesn't happen. How? Jacob looked back at Eliza. At Noel. The boys. At Ezra. Then down at his own hands. Whatever way we have to. The next morning, the crossing became a fortress. Jacob reinforced the windows with boards from the barn. The stranger set traps along the path, snare wires and sharpened, stakes buried just beneath the brush. Eliza stayed in the cellar with the boys and Ezra, listening to the hammering above her, feeling every nail like a heartbeat in her spine. When it got quiet, she climbed up, found Jacob sitting on the porch, watching the woods. He didn't look at her when she sat. Do you ever think about what it would have been like if you hadn't walked away? She asked. Every day. Then why did you? He was quiet for a long time. Then, because I thought I was cursed, that everything I touched got worse. I thought the best thing I could do for you was vanish. She nodded. That's cowardice, she said softly. He didn't argue. Do you still believe that? He turned to her. I don't know what I believe anymore. But I know you're stronger than I ever was. And if I can buy you even one more day, I will. She took his hand. They didn't let go. The sun rose slow. So did the dust on the road. Riders 10. No, 12. The stranger climbed to the roof, rifle steady. Jacob took the front door. Eliza stayed in the cellar until the last moment, Ezra's hand gripping hers with more strength than she expected. "Take care of them," he said. "I will. And take care of you." That part was harder. She climbed up. The first shot rang, out an hour later. Then everything happened fast. Traps snapped, men screamed. The air filled with smoke again, but not from fire, from gunpowder, from rage, from a storm long overdue. Jacob shot 2 before they even reached the porch. The stranger picked off another from the rooftop, but then Maddox appeared, not on a horse, on foot, alone, hat low, coat long. He walked through, the carnage like it bored him, stopped in front of the door. "Eliza," he called out, voice calm. "You don't need to die today. Just bring me the boys." She stepped outside, rifle in hand. Maddox smiled. "Don't be stupid." "You think I don't know what you are?" she asked. "You never wanted justice. You wanted control." He shrugged. "Control is justice. Out here, anyway." He reached for his gun. She fired first, hit his shoulder. He spun, fired back, clipped her arm. Jacob tackled him before he could shoot again. They rolled in the dirt, fists flying, blood spraying, and when Maddox reached for his gun again, the stranger shot him through the chest. Twice. He fell back, gasped, looked at Eliza like she'd rewritten the ending of a story he thought he'd already told, then died. The rest fled. No badge could hold them now. Jacob collapsed beside the body. The stranger holstered his gun, and Eliza, bleeding, breathless, shaking, looked toward the door. Josiah and Eli stood there, watching, afraid but alive. She dropped the rifle, ran to them, held them like she never meant to let go again. And in that moment, bloodied and broken and burning inside, she felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Not peace, not safety, but the beginning of both. The crossing burned again by morning. Not in flames. This time, it was memory that turned to ash. Jacob stood alone at the edge of what used to be the fence line, holding Maddox's badge in one hand and Ezra's bloodied handkerchief in the other. Eliza watched him from the porch, a tight wrap of bandage pressed to her arm. The boys sat on the floor behind her, half asleep against each other, clutching pieces of a deck of cards they'd found in the cellar. Ezra rested on a cot beside them, fever rising. He wasn't dead, but he wasn't getting better either. She knew what infection looked like. She'd seen it crawl through a man like a snake, through dry grass. Quiet at first, then everywhere. The stranger, the one who still hadn't given his name, stood watch at the door. He'd kept his coat on all night, never asked for food, never asked to rest. "There's a storm coming," he said, just after sunrise. Eliza looked up at the sky. "Don't see one." He shook his head. "Not that kind." By midday, 2 more riders were spotted circling the distant hills. Scouts, maybe, or bounty hunters sent from El Paso, come to check if Maddox's death was real. "We need to move," the stranger said. Jacob agreed. But there was Ezra. There was always Ezra. Eliza crouched by his cot, brushing a damp strand of hair from his forehead. "We can carry him," she said quietly. "No," Ezra whispered, barely audible. "You'll die trying." "We're not leaving you." He closed his eyes. "You might have to." "No." "Eliza, you're not dying in this place." He didn't argue again, but he didn't look convinced either. They packed fast. The boys carried what they could. Jacob and the stranger rigged a stretcher from 2 fence posts and a blanket. Eliza held Ezra's hand the entire way down the hill. She never looked back at the crossing. She'd done that once before, and it had cost her everything. They followed a dry riverbed through the ravine, staying low, cutting across rock and scrub, so old no map remembered them. The stranger led with uncanny precision, guiding them through ridges and dead canyons, and into a valley so forgotten it didn't even have a name anymore. They found an old adobe house, buried in brush and collapse. Eliza didn't ask how the stranger knew about it. She just laid Ezra down in the shade and let her sons gather water from the seep that still trickled through a break in the stone. That night, Jacob stood watch. The stranger cleaned his rifle and Eliza sat beside Ezra, threading an old patch from her dress over his chest. He stirred once, reached weakly for her hand. "I saw her," he murmured. "Who?" He smiled faintly. "Anna." Eliza's throat caught. Anna was his wife, dead 5 years now. "She say anything?" she asked. Ezra nodded slowly. "She said, if I see her again, I better make sure it's not too soon." Eliza swallowed back tears. "Then you better stay awake." He tried to laugh, coughed instead. The fire popped once. Outside, something moved. Jacob raised his rifle. The stranger lifted a hand, signaling silence. Then a voice. Male. "Rough. You in the brush? We don't mean harm. We're just looking for someone." Jacob exchanged a look with the stranger. Eliza stood. "Stay with Ezra," she told the boys. She stepped into the dark, Jacob on her right, rifle ready. A man emerged from the trees with his hands up. A young girl, maybe 12, stood behind him. They looked tired, worn out, but not armed. "You Eliza Price?" the man asked. She didn't answer. He slowly reached into his coat, pulled out a folded note. "Your name was written on this. Given to me by someone named Thorne. Said you'd help." The stranger stepped forward at that name. "You know Thorne?" he asked. The man nodded. "He helped us out of Bledsoe County. My daughter was on Maddox's list." "List?" Eliza asked. The man looked around. "You don't know? Maddox wasn't just hunting you. He had a list. Women, children, mostly brown, some black, a few white, but all trouble according to him, all liabilities to order." Eliza's heart dropped. Jacob clenched his fists. The stranger looked up at the trees, jaw locked. "How many?" he asked. "At least 20 families. Some disappeared. Some... well, I don't know what happened to all of them." Eliza turned back toward the adobe, toward her sons, toward Ezra. "We have to stop this," she said. Jacob looked at her. "Eliza, I'm done running. If this isn't just about us, if Maddox had help, if someone out there is still working his game, then we can't hide. We end this. We bring the truth out." The stranger nodded. "Then we go to Grafton." Eliza frowned. "Grafton? That's 2 days east. It's also where the ledger is." "What ledger?" The stranger looked her straight in the eye. "The one with every name Maddox marked. The one his second in command is trying to bury, now that Maddox is dead." Jacob stepped forward. "Then we take it. We show the world." Eliza hesitated, then looked down at her sons. If she didn't do this, someone else would. Someone else's children would vanish next. Someone else's voice would be silenced like hers almost was. She turned to Jacob. "We go at first light." That night was quiet. Too quiet. Ezra didn't stir. The boys slept deep. Jacob stayed up, sharpening a blade with slow, rhythmic strokes that didn't match the look in his eyes. He wasn't thinking about the blade. He was thinking about what would happen if they failed. At dawn, they left the adobe. Ezra insisted on coming. "I can ride a little," he said. "You'll need someone who knows Grafton." Jacob helped him mount a mule they'd found grazing wild on the hillside. The stranger took the lead again. This time, he told them his name. "Call me Bram," he said. No one asked if it was first or last. No one cared. By sundown, they saw the ridge overlooking Grafton, a small town. Quiet. Deceptive. But when they reached the edge of the road, Eliza saw the flags. Federal Marshal's Office had set up a temporary station, and if the ledger was here, it wouldn't be for long. Bram scoped the place from a hilltop. "There," he said, pointing to a stone building with bars on the windows. Sheriff's office. That's where the records are kept, including Maddox's. Can we take it? Jacob asked. Bram gave a long look down at the guards posted near the door. We don't need to take it, Eliza said suddenly. They turned to her. She pointed toward the church, then toward the center of town. We make them give it up. How? Ezra asked, wincing. She turned to her sons, then back to the others. We give them the truth. Not in whispers, not in shadows, in the open. She walked into town before anyone could argue. People turned, whispered. Jacob hurried to catch up. So did Bram. And then she stopped in the center of the square, raised her voice. My name is Eliza Price, she said. And I was branded a fugitive for taking back the children that were stolen from me. Voices rose. A marshal stepped forward. Ma'am, you're under— No, she snapped. You listen. You can try to arrest me. You can try to hang me. But you'll have to do it in front of every mother here, every father, every child, because I am not the only one Maddox tried to erase. Jacob stood beside her, then Bram, then Ezra, barely standing, but there, and then others came. The man from the night before, his daughter, a woman with scars on her cheek, a young boy holding a sign. My sister never came home. They gathered, and the marshal looked around, realizing too late that the lie had grown too loud to survive in silence. Eliza pointed to the office. Bring us the ledger. The marshal didn't move, but someone else did. A woman in a clerk's uniform stepped from the building, holding a thick, worn book in her arms. She gave it to Eliza, hands trembling. Inside were names, dozens, dates, descriptions, labels like unfit, subversive, troublesome. Eliza read them aloud, every last one. The crowd stayed, and when she finished, no one moved for a long time, until someone clapped, then another, then all of them. Because for the first time in a long time, the truth had a voice, and it was loud enough to echo past the hills. For 3 days, the town of Grafton stood still, not in fear, not in silence, but in the kind of suspended reckoning that came when a long lie finally ran out of places to hide. No one ran the shops. No one opened the saloon. Men who once wore badges stood inside their homes, unsure whether their uniforms still meant anything. The mothers walked the streets with eyes that no longer lowered, and children, even those too young to know the full weight of what had happened, clung tighter to their kin and didn't wander far from home. Eliza sat at the steps of the courthouse, the ledger in her lap. She hadn't opened it since that first day. She didn't have to. The names inside were carved into her memory now like stone markers, each one a story that hadn't gotten the chance to be told. Some had already died. Some might still be alive, scattered across the territories, renamed, hidden, forgotten. But now they had proof. Not gossip, not rage. Proof. Bram stood behind her, his coat off for the first time since she met him. Under it, scars lined his shoulders, the kind you don't get from battle, but from captivity. He never spoke of who did it. He never had to. She recognized the look, the need to put space between you and your past, and the fear that no space will ever be enough. Jacob had spent the last day in the church, organizing what the townspeople were calling the testimony circles. Families who had lost someone, or feared they might, came and wrote down everything they knew. Descriptions, last words, where they'd last seen them, even just what their laugh sounded like. It wasn't just about finding them anymore. It was about making sure they were never erased again. Ezra, still weak, slept most of the day in the room above the town's apothecary. He stirred sometimes, asked for Anna. Sometimes he knew where he was. Sometimes he didn't. But when he saw Eliza, he always smiled. That was enough. Eliza stood. It was time. The federal marshal, Brandt, had finally ridden into Grafton that morning. Not one of Maddox's men, a real marshal. weathered, quiet, the kind who'd seen too much to be surprised by any of it. He'd read the ledger without blinking. Didn't ask who forged it. Didn't ask if it was faked. He just asked, "How many are left?" And that was when Eliza knew what had to happen next. She walked through the square now, people parting slowly, eyes on her, not with pity, but with expectation, hope, even fear. Because the more you knew about the truth, the more you feared what else might still be out there. Brant waited in the jailhouse. Bram flanked her. Jacob followed close. "You sure you want to do this?" Brant asked. Eliza nodded. "We're not asking for permission." He looked down at the papers in front of him. Dozens of names, families. "You want me to sanction a retrieval operation, with no funds, no legal warrant, and no guarantees?" "You've got the proof now," she said. "That ledger's federal, which means so is the crime. We're asking you to back it. We'll handle the rest." Brant leaned back. "You planning on bringing them all back yourself?" "No," she said. "I'm planning on building something that will." That afternoon, in the middle of the church, they drafted the oath. It was Jacob's idea. He remembered something from the war, a vow some men had taken, those who worked to smuggle families out from behind Confederate lines. It had no name back then. It didn't need one, just a promise. They called it the Hollow Creed now. Each who joined would swear to protect the displaced, the lost, the stolen. Not with guns, necessarily, but with truth, with shelter, with resistance, and if needed, with fire. Eliza stood at the front and read the vow first. "I swear to speak for those made silent, to see those made invisible, to carry those left behind, and to bring justice without waiting for permission. No badge, no title, just the truth." Others followed. Mothers, ranchers, even the young boy who'd held the sign about his sister. Bram stood last, one hand on his chest, as he repeated the words with a calmness that didn't sound like belief. It sounded like memory. And when it was done, the Hollow Creed had 17 members. By the end of the week, it had 54. By the end of the month, it had hundreds. They rode in pairs, never alone. They carried ledger copies. They interviewed townsfolk. They wrote letters by the dozens. They didn't wear badges, but they wore a mark, a simple circle carved into the wooden buttons of their coats, a hollow ring for what had been taken and what they now vowed to return. Eliza didn't ride often, not at first. Her boys needed her. Ezra still needed care. The town wasn't ready to stand on its own yet, but she trained others, wrote letters, organized routes, found safe houses, connected maps. One day, a woman arrived in Grafton on foot, scarred, dressed in rags, but with a calmness that made everyone hush when she spoke. She held a child's boot in her hands, said her name was Agnes, said she used to clean for Maddox, said she had names too, dozens more. Eliza took her in, fed her, gave her a bed, and sat with her late into the night as she spoke. Some cried when they heard, some screamed. Jacob didn't speak for 2 days after, but no one quit, not once, because now the Hollow Creed wasn't just a reaction. It was a reckoning. And still, the pain came in waves. One day Eliza found Ezra outside the church looking up at the hills. "I dreamed she was walking toward me," he said. "Anna?" He nodded. "But I couldn't move, like the wind was too strong." Eliza rested a hand on his shoulder. "Maybe it's not time yet." He smiled faintly. "Maybe, or maybe," she added. "She's waiting for you to finish what you started." He looked at her. "What we started." She squeezed his hand. That night, the fire pit behind the courthouse blazed high. They burned Maddox's old uniform, his badge, his wanted posters, but they kept the ledger. That would never be burned, not until every name in it had been answered for. A year passed, then 2. The Hollow creeds spread across the territory. No one claimed leadership. Not Eliza, not Bram, not Jacob. They didn't need to. The creed led itself, guided by its purpose, not its names. People whispered about them like myth. They said if a child vanished, the Hollow Creed would find them. If a sheriff grew cruel, they'd be watching. If a town began to erase its poor, its orphans, its outcasts, one morning they'd wake up to a circle carved on the front door. Sometimes it meant help was coming. Sometimes it meant help had already passed through. Eliza's boys grew strong. They learned to ride, to read, to write their names, in full. One night, her youngest, Benji, sat beside her as she stitched a fresh coat. "Mama," he asked, "was it true you were once wanted?" She smiled. "Still am, by some." He laughed. "Why?" "Because I did something they said I couldn't." "What's that?" "I refuse to forget." He was quiet for a while. Then, "Can I join the creed someday?" "You already have." He looked down at the little carved button she'd sewn onto his sleeve. The hollow ring, a mark of absence and of promise. Far out in the desert, a lone rider approached a new settlement. He didn't speak much, didn't carry much, but when he passed the sheriff's office, he left something in the slot of the door, a folded piece of paper. Inside it was a name, and below that name, a circle, drawn in thick ink. No badge, no warning, just the truth. And that was enough.